I never knew how desperate I was until I found myself standing before the gates of the abandoned Veritas tobacco factory on the outskirts of town. A light rain soaked my threadbare coat, and the wind whistled a mournful tune through the sagging barbed wire. I adjusted the worn lunch bag under my arm and pushed the heavy gate, which screamed as if begging not to be opened. The job was simple enough. A lone night watchman 5 nights a week for pay that barely covered the rent of my modest room. But Mr. Crawford, the thin man who interviewed me in the dilapidated employment office, never mentioned the feeling that crept over me the moment my feet touched the gravel-filled yard. It felt as though the massive structure of red brick and iron sighed at my arrival. "The task is clear, isn't it, James?" Mr. Crawford said, peering at me over thick glasses. "A full patrol every 2 hours, log the time at the 10 checkpoints, and make sure the doors leading to the sealed sections are actually locked. Never go to the basement. That area hasn't been safe since the fire." The fire. That was the only word that echoed in the minds of the townspeople whenever I asked about the factory. A fire 30 years ago, said to have claimed the lives of 12 workers trapped in the southern wing. But other details surfaced amid the warnings. Cracking sounds at night, shadows moving against the wind, and third-floor windows that sometimes glowed with a faint light as if someone were still working there. On the first night, I tried to be rational. Imagination was the enemy. The loud noise at the end of Corridor 4B was just a raccoon slipping through a broken window. The shadow sliding behind the storage columns was nothing more than my flashlight playing tricks on airborne dust. But there were things I couldn't explain, like the smell. It wasn't the expected scent of mold and damp wood you'd find in a place abandoned for decades. It was sweet, heavy, and strange. The smell of freshly cured tobacco mixed with something far worse, like burned flesh whose smoke still clung to the walls. And then there were the sounds. Not just creaks or wind. They were low, distant noises, sometimes murmurs, sometimes moans. And in the middle of the second night, I heard it clearly. A woman crying, muffled, broken sobbing coming from the direction of the old elevator sealed behind iron bars. My phone got no signal inside those thick walls. My wristwatch was my only companion in the oppressive silence, broken only by my hesitant footsteps. Then I began noticing inconsistencies in the inspection logs. The notebook hanging beside each checkpoint sometimes showed that someone had signed in minutes before I arrived, in a childish, uneven scrawl. But I was the only one there. That was impossible. One night, I found a page soaked, as if someone had cried on it. On the third night, I read the rusted sign hanging on the iron door leading to the basement. No entry risk of collapse. But beneath it, written in faded red paint as if worn by time, were other words. "This is where they keep the truth." A chill ran through me. Truth. Veritas. I had never thought about the Latin meaning of the factory's name. I wondered what truth they had hidden here, and why the place still stood instead of being demolished. On the fourth night, the thing that changed everything happened. I was on my second patrol around 1 a.m. in the vast packaging section. The room was pitch black. The high windows were boarded shut. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing long, silent production lines, coated in thick layers of time's dust. Then I heard it. Not murmuring, not crying. A machine. Hum, hum, hum. A steady mechanical sound, like a hydraulic press or a cutting shear coming from the far end of the hall. I froze, my heart pounding as if it wanted to burst from my chest. Then the sound stopped. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself it was an auditory hallucination caused by exhaustion. But when I turned my flashlight toward the source, I saw it. A chair. An old rotating office chair. One that hadn't been there half an hour earlier during my first patrol. And it was spinning. Slowly. Almost silently. As if someone had just stood up from it. I ran. I won't pretend otherwise. I fled the dark corridors back to my small office near the entrance, where the pale green desk lamp shone like a beacon of safety. I slammed the door, pressed my back against it, gasping for breath. I looked at the old CCTV monitor with its 9 screens covering the main entrances. All were still, dark, empty, except one. The camera pointed at the packaging section, the one where I had left the chair, showed a still image of the empty room, but in the lower corner on the mat by the storage door, there was a shadow. A long, distorted shadow that matched no known object in the room. And it was moving, slowly, swaying, as if someone were standing there, rocking back and forth. I screamed and gripped the edge of the desk until my hands hurt. Then, suddenly, all the screens went black at once, plunging the office into darkness. The desk lamp didn't go out entirely, but it flickered weakly, casting twitching shadows on the walls. The air around me grew cold rapidly, and the smell of burnt tobacco thickened until I nearly choked. Then, I heard the murmurs. This time, they weren't distant. They surrounded me. Unintelligible words whispered from every corner of the small room, whispers filled with sorrow, anger, and something else. Something like pleading. Go, go, don't stay here. A woman's voice, a man's voice, a child's voice, all merging into a terrifying discord. The desk lamp burst into a final frenzy of flickers before dying completely, plunging everything into absolute darkness. The murmurs grew louder, turning into muffled, trapped screams. I felt cold hands on my face pushing me toward the door. I wasn't thinking. I was surviving. I opened the door and bolted into the yard. The rain hadn't stopped, and the cold air outside was a blessing despite soaking my clothes. I didn't look back. I ran through the muddy fields surrounding the factory until I reached the main road, where I doubled over, vomiting from fear and exhaustion. I never went back. The next day, I went to Mr. Crawford's office to quit, but found it closed, empty, covered in dust that suggested it hadn't been used in months. I asked around town, but no one knew a man named Crawford. According to municipal records, the factory was owned by a shell company, and no night watch had been officially employed there for years. But the story didn't end there. In the nights that followed, I began to see things, not in the factory, but in my home. Shadows at the edge of my vision that vanished when I turned, the smell of burnt tobacco suddenly filling my bedroom. And one night, as I drank tea in my silent kitchen, I heard it clearly through my closed windows. Hum, hum, hum. I looked out into the darkness. The street was deserted. The neighboring houses were dark. But under the dim streetlight across from my home stood a shadow. Tall, thin. Its outline blurred, as if vibrating or evaporating. It had no clear features, but I felt it watching me. I placed my hand on the cold glass. My breath fogged the window. Then, slowly, as if an invisible finger were writing, words appeared in the condensation from the other side of the glass. 2 words only. Come finish the shift. I thought I would lose my mind. I screamed, drew the curtains, and ran to my bedroom, where I trembled under the covers until dawn. Since then, I've understood. They don't want me dead. They want me back. I've become bound to that place, as if an invisible thread has tied my soul to those dark walls. I dream of them, men and women with wide, terror-filled eyes, trapped in a circle of fire and relentless machines. Dreams of a massive hydraulic press crushing not tobacco, but other things. And dreams of a hidden room in the basement where the true truth of Veritas lies buried beneath the ash. On the nights when I don't dream, I hear footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps climbing the wooden stairs of my apartment building, stopping outside my door. Then a long silence. Then a soft scratching on the wood, as if long fingernails were gently scraping, waiting for an invitation that never comes. I went to the police, but they dismissed my story as hallucinations brought on by stress. I tried to leave town, but the car broke down in strange ways every time, and I felt something pulling me back. a malignant gravitational force centered on those faded red towers on the horizon. Last night, while desperately searching the internet for anything that might help, I found it. A scanned article from an old local newspaper published a few weeks after the fire. It spoke of the investigation and the difficulty of identifying some bodies due to the severity of the burns. But in the final paragraph, mentioned almost as an afterthought, was this. Among the victims was the night watchman on duty, Mr. Elijah Crawford, who is believed to have entered the burning building in a failed rescue attempt. Crawford. He wasn't just a hiring manager. He was the first victim. Or perhaps their first soldier. And now, here I am, sitting in my apartment as night once again blankets the town. The window is slightly open and the smell of burnt tobacco is strong in the air. I know what they want. They're trapped there, in that moment of terror 30 years ago, and they need someone to take the watchman's place, to guard their eternal prison. And I'm beginning to understand the words on the basement door. The truth isn't a secret about the fire. The truth is that death is not the end, and that some places can become living hells for your soul, dragging you back to finish duties that were never truly completed.